The great chamber was silent. 847 different species sat in their seats waiting. The air hummed with translation devices working hard to turn alien words into something everyone could understand. Above them all, the neutron star Kepler 442 spun like a lighthouse in space, sending waves of energy through the station's shields. Ambassador Lee Dae-ho adjusted his simple black suit. Around him, aliens wore robes, armor, and things that had no names in human language. Some floated in tanks of purple liquid. Others stood on 6 legs or hung from the ceiling like bats. He was one of only 3 humans in the room, and he could feel eyes watching him from every direction. Commander Park So-min sat behind him, her hand resting on her tablet. She was there to take notes and watch for trouble. Her dark eyes moved constantly, checking exits and counting security guards, old habits from her days in the Earth Defense Force. At the center of the chamber, something ancient began to speak. Counselor Velthanis looked like smoke given form, a being so old that most species had myths about its kind. Its voice came from everywhere and nowhere, translated into perfect human speech. "We gather for the 1,000-year reading," Velthanis said, "the laws that keep peace among the stars. The rules written in blood and sealed with the promise of extinction." Lee Dae-ho had heard this ceremony before. Every 1,000 years, the Galactic Council read the forbidden decrees. Most were simple things. Do not poison stars. Do not create weapons that eat planets. Do not wake the things that sleep in dark space. But there was one rule that made even the bravest species whisper. Rule 0. Velthanis continued, its voice dropping to barely a whisper. Never anger the humans. Laughter erupted from the Tolvak section. These were tall, gray-skinned warriors with 4 arms and eyes like black holes. Their leader, a massive being called Tolvak, stood up. His armor clinked as he moved. "This is foolish," Tolvak said, his voice booming through translators. "Humans are weak. They have been in space for only 200 years. They have no great fleets, no planet-killing weapons. Why should we fear them?" More laughter came from other sections. The crystal beings called Zefkari chimed like broken glass. The hegemony delegates clicked their mandibles in what passed, for amusement among their insect-like species. Lee Dae-ho said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence was often the best response to insults. Beside him, Park So-min's jaw tightened, but she also stayed quiet. Velthanis waited for the laughter to die down. When it did, the ancient being's form seemed to grow darker. "You laugh because you are young," it said. "Your species count their ages in thousands of years. I count mine in millions. I was here when Rule 0 was written. I remember why it exists." The chamber grew quiet again. Even the Tolvak stopped their mocking. 50,000 years ago, there was another human delegation that sat in this chamber. They were quiet like these ones. They asked for nothing but a small corner of space to call home. The Kethmori Empire laughed at them. The Veltaran Republic called them pets. The Zargothic hegemony decided to make them slaves. Velthanis paused, and for a moment, the neutron star's pulse seemed to match a heartbeat. 3 days later, all 3 civilizations were gone. Not conquered, not defeated, gone. Their homeworlds were empty. Their fleets were found drifting in space, crews vanished. In the center of each empire's capital, there was a message burned into the ground in letters 1,000 kilometers tall. The chamber was so quiet that Lee Dae-ho could hear his own breathing. The message was simple, Velthanis continued. They should not have angered us. That was all. No demands, no threats, just a statement of fact. Tolvak laughed again, but it sounded forced. Old stories, myths. If humans were so powerful, where have they been for 50,000 years? Velthanis turned its attention to the human delegation. For the first time, Lee Dae-ho felt the weight of that ancient gaze. "Where have you been?" Velthanis asked. Lee Dae-ho stood slowly. He was not a tall man, and his hair was going gray at the temples. He looked like what he was, a career diplomat who preferred books to battles. When he spoke, his voice was calm and quiet. "We have been watching," he said. "We have been learning. We have been waiting." "Waiting for what?" Tolvac demanded. Li Deho looked at the Tolvac leader for a long moment. For someone to make the same mistake as the Keth Mori, the Velteran and the Zargothic, the threat was so quiet, so politely spoken, that it took several seconds for the translation devices to process it. When they did, a ripple of unease went through the chamber. Tolvac's forearms flexed, and his hand moved to the ceremonial weapon at his side. "Are you threatening the Tolvac Empire, little human?" "No," Li Deho said simply. "I am reminding you why Rule 0 exists." Park So-min watched the room carefully. She could see security guards moving closer, hands on weapons. Several species were starting to look nervous. The ethereals like Velthanis were beginning to glow brighter, which meant they were upset. But Li Deho seemed completely calm. He sat back down and folded his hands in his lap as if nothing had happened. Velthanis continued with the ceremony, reading through the other forbidden decrees. But the mood in the chamber had changed. Species that had been joking and laughing were now quiet. Even the Tolvac seemed less sure of themselves. When the ceremony ended, most delegates filed out quickly. They had trade deals to make and territories to negotiate. But several groups lingered, talking in hushed voices about the humans and their strange warning. Tolvac approached the human section as Li Deho was packing his papers. The alien warrior towered over the seated diplomat, using his height to try to intimidate. "Your species interests me, human," Tolvac said. "Perhaps it is time the galaxy learned what you are really capable of." Li Deho looked up at the alien and smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "I hope not," he said quietly. "For your sake." As the humans left the chamber, Park So-min noticed that Velthanis was watching them go. The ancient being's form was flickering, which usually meant it was thinking hard about something. Later, in their quarters on the station, Park So-min asked the question that had been bothering her all day. "Sir, was that really a threat? About Rule 0? Li Deho was reading a report on his tablet. Without looking up, he said, "It was not a threat, Commander. It was a historical fact." "And if they test us?" This time Li Deho did look up. His eyes were tired, like those of a man who had seen too much of the universe's capacity for violence. "Then they will learn why our ancestors left this galaxy 50,000 years ago," he said, "and why we came back." Park So-min felt a chill run down her spine. In all her years serving with Li Deho, she had never heard him sound like that. Cold, final, like a door closing on something that could never be opened again. Outside their window, the neutron star pulsed its ancient rhythm, counting down to something that most of the galaxy could not imagine. Captain Kim Tae-jun stood on the bridge of the New Sol and watched Harmony's Rest turn slowly below them. The planet looked peaceful from orbit. Green continents, blue oceans, white clouds. It was hard to believe that in a few hours everything might change. "Captain," called Dr. Choi Hee-jin from her station, "I'm reading 37 Tolvac warships dropping out of hyperspace. They're forming attack formation." Kim nodded but did not seem surprised. The warning had come 3 days ago through secret channels. The Tolvac Empire had decided that Harmony's Rest was too valuable to leave in human hands. The planet had rare minerals and sat on a perfect trade route. More importantly, it would send a message to other species that humans could be pushed around. "How many civilians are still on the planet?" Kim asked. "About 12,000, said his first officer, Lieutenant Yu Gi-seok. "Most are in the main settlement, families, researchers, teachers. The evacuation ships won't arrive for another week." Kim felt a weight in his stomach. The New Sol was not a warship. It was a research vessel with light shields and no weapons worth mentioning. Against 37 Tolvac destroyers, it would last about as long as paper in a fire. The communication system crackled to life. A harsh voice spoke in the clicking language of the Tolvac, then the translator took over. "Human vessel, this is Overlord Krextar of the Tolvac Third Fleet. You are in violation of Galactic Territory Regulation 447B. This system now belongs to the Tolvac Empire. You have 1 hour to evacuate all humans from the planet's surface and leave this system. Kim took a deep breath and opened a channel. Overlord Krextar, this is Captain Kim Tae-jun of the human vessel New Soul. Harmony's Rest is a registered human colony under the Galactic Colonization Treaty. Your claim has no legal basis. The response came quickly. Legal basis is for the weak, human. You have 59 minutes. Dr. Choi Hye-jin looked up from her console. She had spent 5 years on Harmony's Rest, studying the planet's unique plant life. The research station below was her life's work. Captain, even if we had enough ships, we couldn't evacuate everyone in an hour. There are children in the settlement, elderly people who can't travel, medical patients who would die if we moved them. Kim knew this. He also knew something else that Dr. Choi did not. Hidden in the New Soul's computer system was a program that had been waiting for 200 years. Every human ship had it, every human base had it. It was called Protocol 7, and it had never been used until now. Lieutenant Yu, Kim said quietly, send a priority Alpha message to Earth. Tell them we have a Code 7 situation. Include our exact coordinates and the time of first contact with hostile forces. Yu's fingers moved quickly over his console. A Code 7 message would reach Earth in less than an hour, carried by quantum communicators that officially did not exist. It would also trigger automatic responses from every human installation within 50 light-years. On the planet below, the human colonists were watching the Tolvac ships through telescopes. They had families, jobs, homes. Most had never seen a real war. They trusted that somehow their government would protect them. They were about to learn how far their government would go to keep that promise. Captain, Dr. Choi said, her voice tight with worry. The Tolvac ships are moving into bombardment position. They're targeting the main settlement. Kim felt something cold settle in his chest. The colonists had done nothing wrong. They had followed every galactic law, filed every proper form, paid every tax. Their only crime was being human on a planet that someone else wanted. The communication system crackled again. Human Captain, your time is up. We will now demonstrate Tolvac resolve. Wait, Kim said quickly. We need more time. There are children down there. Families. They can't just... The transmission cut off. From the Tolvac flagship, a beam of blue energy lanced down toward the planet. It struck the main settlement's community center, where families often gathered for meals and children played games. The building vaporized instantly, along with the park around it and the school next door. Dr. Choi Hye-jin screamed. More beams followed. The research station where Dr. Choi had worked for years disappeared in a flash of light. The hospital, the housing blocks, the small spaceport where supply ships landed. Kim watched in silence as 400 human beings died in 30 seconds. His hands were steady on the control panel, but his eyes were the color of winter storms. All human souls lost, reported Lieutenant Yu, his voice barely a whisper. I'm reading no life signs from the impact zones. Overlord Krextar to human ship, came the alien voice. This is what happens to those who defy the Tolvac Empire. Leave now or join your people on the surface. Kim opened the channel one more time. His voice was very calm, very quiet. Message received, Overlord. We are leaving the system. Good. Perhaps your species can be taught after all. The New Soul turned away from the planet and began moving toward the hyperspace jump point. Behind them, Tolvac ships settled into orbit around Harmony's Rest, already beginning to scan for mining sites. Dr. Choi was crying at her station. Lieutenant Yu was staring at his console like he could not believe what the sensors were telling him. Other crew members sat in shocked silence. But Kim was thinking about something else. He was thinking about a conversation he had once had with his grandfather, an old man who had fought in Earth's last war before they joined the galactic community. Tae-jun, the old man had said, there are two kinds of people in the universe. Those who think strength is about showing how tough you are, and those who know that real strength is about choosing when to use it. What's the difference, grandfather? The first kind makes a lot of noise and wins a few battles. The second kind stays quiet and wins the war. As the new soul jumped to hyperspace, Kim activated his personal communicator. It was connected directly to Earth's Defense Council, bypassing all normal diplomatic channels. "This is Captain Kim Tae-jun," he said. "I am transmitting full recordings of the Harmony's Rest incident. 400 confirmed civilian casualties, including 73 children under the age of 16. Tolvak forces used orbital bombardment on non-combatants after being told civilians needed time to evacuate." He paused, looking back at the fading star that had once warmed a peaceful human colony. "I recommend immediate activation of Protocol 7. All levels, all assets, no restrictions. On Earth, in a bunker beneath the Swiss Alps, General Yoon Byung-ho received Kim's message. He was a small man with gray hair and the kind of face that never showed emotion. He had been waiting his entire career for this message, hoping it would never come. He read the report twice, watched the recordings 3 times, and checked the casualty list 4 times. Then he walked to a wall safe that had not been opened in 50 years. Inside was a single key and a piece of paper with 12 words written on it. "When humanity is threatened, humanity responds. There are no half measures." General Yoon inserted the key into a console that looked like it belonged in a museum. Numbers began scrolling across ancient screens. All across human space, computers that had been sleeping for decades began to wake up. In asteroid belts, mining ships that were not really mining ships received new orders. On colony worlds, farmers who were not really farmers checked weapons that had been hidden in barns and basements. In deep space, research stations that were not really research stations began moving toward predetermined coordinates. The message that went out was simple and was sent to every human in the galaxy. "Children of Earth, our family has been murdered. It is time to remind the galaxy who we really are." Dr. Choi Hee-jin stopped crying long enough to notice that something had changed about Captain Kim. He was still the same quiet man she had known for 3 years. But there was something different in his eyes, something cold and patient and absolutely certain. "Captain," she said quietly, "what happens now?" Kim looked at her with the kind of expression that made her think of winter coming to a warm planet. "Now," he said, "the Tolvak Empire learns why our ancestors left the galaxy 50,000 years ago, and why we came back." Dr. Shin Woo-jin had been waiting in the Deep Space Station for 30 years. To anyone who asked, he was a quantum physicist studying dark matter. His research papers were real, his experiments were groundbreaking, and his Nobel Prize sat on his desk next to a picture of his daughter. What no one knew was that his real job was much more important than studying the universe. His real job was preparing to change it. The activation signal came at 0347 station time, a simple message that looked like stellar navigation data to anyone who might intercept it. But to Dr. Shin, it meant that 30 years of preparation were about to be tested. He walked to a wall panel that looked exactly like every other wall panel in the station. When he placed his hand on it, scanners read his DNA, his fingerprints, and the pattern of blood vessels in his eyes. The wall slid away to reveal a room that officially did not exist. Inside were computers that made the best galactic technology look like children's toys. Screens showed star maps with thousands of red dots scattered across the galaxy. Each dot represented a human who was not what they seemed to be. Dr. Shin activated his communicator. "Prometheus Group, this is Lazarus. Prime, execute Protocol 7, all cells active, authorization Omega 77. Across the galaxy, humans began to move. Agent Ko Hyun-woo had been living on the Tolvak homeworld for 15 years. His neighbors knew him as a maintenance worker who fixed heating systems in apartment buildings. He was quiet, polite, and so boring that people forgot he existed the moment he left the room. That was exactly what made him perfect for his real job. When Ko received the activation signal, he was under the city in the maintenance tunnels. The Tolvak had built their capital on top of a network of old mining tunnels, and Ko knew every pipe, cable, and junction box in the system. He also knew exactly where to place the devices he had been building for 15 years. Ko's first target was the planetary defense grid. The Tolvak were proud of their military technology, but they had made one mistake. They had bought their computer systems from 17 different species, and none of those systems were designed to work together perfectly. Ko had spent years learning every weakness, every backdoor, every little gap between systems. Now he used that knowledge. The virus he uploaded was a work of art. It did not destroy anything or set off any alarms. Instead, it made tiny changes to the targeting systems. A decimal point moved one place to the left. A targeting priority shifted from enemy ships to friendly ships. A safety protocol that was supposed to prevent friendly fire was quietly deleted. By the time Ko was finished, every defense satellite around the Tolvac homeworld would fire on its own people if anyone tried to activate them. Lieutenant Colonel Jang Mi-kyung was aboard a ship that did not appear on any official records. The silent thunder looked like empty space to every sensor in the galaxy. Even if someone was looking directly at it, their eyes would slide away without seeing anything. The ship itself was impossible by galactic standards. It bent space around itself, making it smaller on the outside than the inside. Its engines moved through dimensions that most species did not even know existed. Its weapons could reach through space and time to hit targets that were technically in different universes. "Colonel," reported her pilot, Lieutenant Nam Haiwan, "we are in position above the Tolvac homeworld. No one has detected us." Jang looked at the planet below. 7 billion Tolvac lived down there. Most of them had never heard of humans before today. In a few hours, they would understand exactly what humans were capable of. "Begin Phase 1, she ordered. "Target all military communication. Satellites, use the quantum disruptors. Weapons that existed only in theory fired at targets that could not fight back." Across Tolvac space, military communications began to fail. Orders from Fleet Command turned into random noise. Battle plans became shopping lists. Emergency codes became love poems. Meanwhile, on the Galactic Council station, Counselor Velthanis was trying to reach human leadership. For 3 days, every human embassy had gone silent. Trade ships were not responding to hails. Even scientific expeditions had stopped sending reports. It was as if the entire human species had simply vanished. Velthanis had seen this before, 50,000 years ago. The silence that came before the storm. The ancient being activated every communication system it could access, sending messages on every frequency that human technology could receive. The response was always the same: an automated message in perfect galactic standard. The Galactic Compact has been violated. Innocent. Human civilians have been murdered without cause. There will be consequences. This is not a threat, this is a promise. Velthanis tried to explain to the other council members what was happening, but they did not want to listen. The Tolvac Empire was too strong, they said. Humans were too weak. This was probably just a diplomatic protest that would blow over in a few months. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Back on his deep space station, Dr. Shin was coordinating the largest military operation in galactic history. On his screens, reports came in from cells across known space. Agent Park Soo-young had taken control of the Tolvac banking system. Every military account now showed a balance of 0. Soldiers would not be paid. Contractors would not deliver supplies. The war machine would starve for lack of money. Agent Lee Dong-wook had infiltrated the Tolvac news networks. Instead of military propaganda, citizens were now seeing footage of their empire's war crimes. The orbital bombardment of harmonies. Rest played on every channel, followed by evidence of dozens of other atrocities that the government had tried to hide. Agent Song Ye-jin had taken over the empire's logistics computers. Supply ships carrying food were being rerouted to refugee camps. Ships carrying weapons were being sent to empty space. The military was slowly being strangled by its own supply chain. Dr. Shin smiled as he watched the reports. Humans had learned patience from their 50,000 years away from the galaxy. They had learned to plan not for years, but for centuries. They had learned that the best way to win a war was to make sure the enemy could not fight at all. But patience had its limits. Emperor Vorthak of the Tolvac Empire was trying to understand what was happening to his domain. His military commanders could not communicate with their fleets. His banks were refusing to honor government accounts. His people were rioting in the streets after seeing footage of war crimes they had never known about, and somehow, it was all connected to the humans. Vorthak had never taken humans seriously. They were a small species with no great achievements. Their ships were slow, their weapons were weak, and their diplomats were boring. How could they possibly threaten an empire that had conquered half a galaxy? He was about to find out. Dr. Shin received a priority message from General Yoon on Earth. The message was short. Phase 2 authorized. Show them what we learned in the dark. Dr. Shin's smile disappeared. Phase 2 was something he had hoped they would never need to use. It would reveal capabilities that humanity had spent 2 centuries developing in secret. Once they used these weapons, there would be no going back to being the peaceful species that everyone ignored. But the Tolvac had made their choice when they murdered children on Harmony's Rest. Prometheus Group, Dr. Shin said into his communicator. Phase 2 is authorized. Release the Ghost Fleet. Across the galaxy, space began to change. In the emptiness between stars, ships that had been hiding for decades began to move. They had been built in secret shipyards that existed in folded space, crewed by volunteers who had officially died in training accidents. The Ghost Fleet was humanity's deepest secret. 300 ships that could not be seen, could not be detected, and carried weapons that most species would consider impossible. Lieutenant Colonel Jang watched from the bridge of the Silent Thunder as the Ghost Fleet materialized around every major Tolvac world. The ships did not attack. They simply appeared and waited like black angels hanging in space. On the Tolvac homeworld, Emperor Vorthak received reports that made no sense. His people claimed to see ships that were not on any scanner. His military insisted that there was nothing there, but his citizens swore they could see death waiting in the sky. The psychological effect was exactly what humanity had planned. Fear spread through the empire like a plague. If humans could appear anywhere without warning, if they could take control of any system, if they could make an entire civilization doubt its own senses, then what else could they do? The answer to that question would come in the next phase of humanity's response. But for now, Dr. Shin was content to watch the Tolvac Empire tear itself apart from the inside. They had forgotten the most important lesson in galactic history: never anger the humans. Soon they would remember why that rule existed. Fleet Admiral Quan Sang-wook had been dead for 23 years. At least that was what the official records said. His death certificate was filed on Earth, his funeral was attended by 300 people, and his grave had flowers on it every year on the anniversary of his death. The reality was much more complicated. Admiral Quan stood on the bridge of the Eternal Silence, a ship that existed in folded space-time. Around him, the bridge crew worked at stations that controlled weapons capable of cracking planets in half. These people were all officially dead too, volunteers who had given up their lives to become something that most of the galaxy could not imagine. They were the command crew of the Ghost Fleet, and today they would remind the universe why humans had once been feared across 1,000 star systems. Admiral, reported Captain Lim Jun-ho from his position at the tactical station. All Ghost Fleet units are in position. We have complete coverage of every major Tolvac military installation. Admiral Quan nodded. Through the ship's impossible viewing system, he could see Tolvac ships trying to find an enemy they could not detect. Their sensors showed empty space, but their crews could feel something watching them. It was a feeling humans knew well. The knowledge that somewhere in the dark, something was hunting you. Captain Lim, Admiral Quan said quietly, take your ship and show them what we learned in the spaces between galaxies. One target, make it count. Captain Lim smiled. He had been waiting 20 years for this moment. The Silent Thunder dropped out of folded space directly above a Tolvac dreadnought. For exactly 17 seconds, it was visible to every sensor in the system. In those 17 seconds, Captain Lim demonstrated why humanity was not the weak species that everyone believed them to be. The Tolvac dreadnought was 2 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. It had shields that could stop anything in the galactic arsenal and armor made from metals that existed only in the cores of neutron stars. None of that mattered. Captain Lim's ship fired a single weapon. It looked like nothing more than a brief shimmer in space, but it reached into the quantum structure of reality itself. The weapon grabbed the Tolvac ship's mass and twisted it through dimensions that had no names in any language. The dreadnought folded in on itself like paper being crumpled by invisible hands. 2 kilometers of advanced warship compressed into a sphere the size of a marble. The sphere hung in space for a moment, then vanished into a pocket dimension where it would fall forever. The entire engagement lasted 17 seconds. When it was over, the silent thunder faded back into invisibility, leaving only empty space where a mighty warship had been. Across the Tolvac fleet, panic spread like fire. On the planet below, Director Nam In-seo was beginning the next phase of humanity's response. Her job was psychological warfare, and she was very good at her job. Every Tolvac citizen received a personal message delivered through their home communication system. The message knew their name, their address, their family members, and their daily routine. It was delivered in their own voice as if they were talking to themselves. "Hello, Krexelar," the message would say, using the recipient's exact pronunciation. "You live at 47 Stone Circle, level 15, in the capital city. You work at the metals refinery and take the same route home every day. Your mate Velkara picks up your children from school at exactly 1500 hours. They attend Bright Talons Elementary, where they are in the 3rd and 5th learning groups." The message would pause here, letting the implications sink in. "We know where you are. We know where your family is. We know everything about your life. Your government ordered the murder of our children, but we are not like your government. We do not make war on innocence. We choose mercy. This time." The effect was immediate and devastating. Millions of Tolvac citizens realized that the mysterious humans could reach them anywhere, anytime, but had chosen not to harm them. It was a level of psychological warfare that most species could not even comprehend. Emperor Vorthak tried to rally his remaining forces, but discovered that most other species wanted nothing to do with the Tolvac Empire. Intelligence reports about Tolvac war crimes had somehow found their way to every major government in the galaxy. Secret plans to conquer neighboring systems were being broadcast on public news networks. Financial records showing corruption and theft were spreading across diplomatic channels. The Tolvac Empire found itself completely alone. How? Emperor Vorthak demanded of his intelligence chief. How do the humans know our most classified secrets? How are they inside our most secure systems? Intelligence Chief Morkoth was a creature that looked like a cross between a spider and a computer. Its multiple eyes clicked as it processed data at superhuman speeds. "Emperor," it said, in a voice like grinding metal, "I have analyzed all available data. The conclusion is impossible but unavoidable. The humans have been preparing for this moment for approximately 200 years. They have agents embedded at every level of our society. They have been studying our technology, our tactics, and our weaknesses since the day they joined the galactic community." "That is impossible," Vorthak said. "Humans are weak. They have no great fleets, no planet-killing weapons." Morkoth's eyes clicked again. "With respect, Emperor, I believe we have been deceived. The humans who joined the galactic community 200 years ago were not the same humans who disappeared 50,000 years ago. They are the same species." The implications hit Vorthak like a physical blow. If Morkoth was right, then humanity had spent 50,000 years somewhere else, learning and growing and preparing. They had returned to the galaxy not as refugees seeking shelter, but as wolves in sheep's clothing. Admiral Quan received new orders from Earth. The message was simple: end this. Across the galaxy, the Ghost Fleet began to move. Not to attack, but to demonstrate. They appeared over every Tolvac world simultaneously, no longer hiding their presence. Citizens looked up to see ships that existed halfway between reality and nightmare, vessels that hurt the eyes to look at directly. The ships did not fire their weapons. They did not need to. Their mere presence was enough to break the spirit of an empire that had thought itself invincible. On the flagship Eternal Silence, Admiral Quan opened a communication channel that reached every Tolvac military unit in the galaxy. I am Fleet Admiral Kwan Sang-wook of the Human Defense Force, he said. His voice was calm and professional, like a teacher explaining a simple lesson. Your empire has committed acts of aggression against innocent human civilians. This cannot be allowed to continue. He paused, letting his words sink in. You have exactly 24 hours to surrender all military assets and submit to galactic justice for war crimes. If you refuse, we will demonstrate why your ancestors knew to fear us. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact. The transmission ended, leaving the Tolvak fleet commanders staring at empty space where impossible ships waited with infinite patience. Emperor Vorthak made one last desperate attempt to save his empire. He activated the planetary defense grid around the homeworld, calling up every weapon platform and defense satellite in the system. The weapons turned on and immediately began firing on each other. Agent Ko Hyun-woo's sabotage had been even more thorough than anyone had imagined. The entire defense network had been turned into a trap, waiting for someone to activate it. Within minutes, the most powerful military installation in Tolvak space destroyed itself. Ko watched the fireworks from his apartment window and allowed himself a small smile. 15 years of patient work had paid off. On Earth, General Yoon received reports that the Tolvak military was collapsing faster than anyone had expected. Some units were surrendering without firing a shot. Others were simply abandoning their posts and fleeing into deep space. The Tolvak Empire, which had seemed so powerful just days before, was falling apart like a house made of cards. Dr. Shin monitored the situation from his deep space station. Phase 2 had been more successful than even he had dared to hope. The Tolvak were broken as a military force. Their government was in chaos, and their people were demanding answers about war crimes they had never known their leaders committed. But the most important part was still to come. Humanity had demonstrated its power, but now it had to show the galaxy what it planned to do with that power. That would determine whether this was the beginning of a new galactic order, or the start of a war that would burn across the stars for 1,000 years. Admiral Kwan checked the chronometer on his command console. 22 hours and 37 minutes until the deadline. He hoped the Tolvak would make the right choice. But if they did not, humanity was prepared to remind the galaxy why Rule Zero existed. Some lessons, it seemed, had to be taught more than once. President Han Ji-woo walked into the Galactic Council chamber with the measured steps of someone who knew that every eye in the galaxy was watching her. 3 months had passed since the Harmony's Rest incident, and the chamber had never been so full. Every species had sent their highest-ranking leaders, and for the first time in galactic history, there were no empty seats. Behind her walked Admiral Park So-min, no longer the quiet military attaché who had once taken notes in this same room. Now she wore the uniform of the Human Defense Force High Command, and her presence sent a clear message. Humanity was no longer asking for permission to exist. Ambassador Lee Dae-ho sat in the human delegation section, watching the faces of aliens who had once dismissed his species as insignificant. Their expressions ranged from fear to respect to something that might have been awe. The Tolvak section was empty. There was no Tolvak Empire left to send representatives. President Han reached the speaking platform at the center of the chamber. She was a small woman with gray hair and gentle eyes, the kind of person who looked like someone's grandmother. When she spoke, her voice was soft and calm, barely above a whisper. But in the absolute silence of the chamber, every word carried to the farthest corners. 3 months ago, she began, Tolvak forces murdered 400 innocent human civilians, including 73 children. They did this to make a point about Tolvak's strength. Today, I am here to discuss the consequences of that action. She paused, her eyes moving across the assembled delegates. Many of them could not meet her gaze. The Tolvak Empire no longer exists as a political entity. Their military has been disbanded. Their leadership is awaiting trial for war crimes. Their worlds are now under human protection mandate, and their people are learning what it means to live under a government that does not commit genocide for profit. A ripple of unease went through the chamber. Several species had empires built on conquest and slavery. They were beginning to understand that the rules of the galaxy had changed. Some of you are wondering how this happened, President Han continued. How a species that you considered weak and primitive could dismantle a galactic empire in 72 hours without firing a shot at a single civilian target. She smiled, and it was not a cruel smile, but it was not entirely kind either. The answer is simple. You never bothered to ask who we really were. In the ethereal section, Counselor Velthanus watched with something approaching satisfaction. The ancient being had tried to warn the younger species, but they had not listened. Now they would learn the truth that had been hidden for 50 millennia. 50,000 years ago, President Han said, our ancestors made a choice. They could stay in this galaxy and rule it through fear, or they could leave and find another way. They chose to leave. For 50,000 years, humanity grew and learned in galaxies far from here. We developed technologies that you cannot imagine. We learned patience, we learned wisdom, and we learned that true strength comes not from the ability to destroy, but from the choice not to use that ability. Admiral Park stepped forward and activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. It showed star maps, fleet positions, and technological specifications that made several delegates gasp out loud. We returned to this galaxy 200 years ago, President Han continued, not as conquerors but as observers. We wanted to see if the younger species had learned to live in peace. We hoped that we could simply be neighbors and friends. The hologram showed human ships, not the simple research vessels that everyone had seen but the real fleet. Hundreds of vessels that could bend space and time, weapons that could reach across dimensions, defensive systems that existed in multiple universes simultaneously. For 200 years we watched and waited. We saw empires rise and fall. We saw species enslaved and liberated. We saw wars fought for resources that we could have provided freely. And we hoped that eventually you would learn to be better. Her voice became harder now, carrying the weight of disappointment and loss. But some of you did not learn. Some of you saw our peaceful nature as weakness. Some of you decided that human children were acceptable casualties in your games of power. The hologram changed to show the Tolvac attack on Harmony's Rest. The footage was clear and detailed, showing Tolvac ships deliberately targeting civilian areas after being told that families needed time to evacuate. Several delegates looked away. This is why we could not allow the Tolvac Empire to continue existing, President Han said. Not because they threatened us militarily. They never had that capability. But because they showed that they would murder innocents without hesitation or regret. Former Overlord Krextar sat in a detention facility on Earth, watching the proceedings on a small screen. The being who had once commanded fleets and conquered worlds was now a prisoner awaiting trial. He had spent 3 months trying to understand how his mighty empire had been destroyed so completely. The answer was sitting in front of the entire galaxy. The Human Federation is hereby proposing new galactic accords, President Han announced. These accords will establish clear rules about the treatment of civilian populations, the conduct of military operations, and the consequences for violating these rules. Admiral Park activated another hologram, this one showing a detailed legal framework that had clearly been in development for decades. Under these accords, any species that deliberately targets civilian populations will face immediate intervention by human defense forces. Any government that practices slavery will be given 1 year to end the practice or face economic and military sanctions. Any empire that seeks to expand through conquest will find themselves facing opponents they cannot defeat. The chamber erupted in angry voices from several of the more militaristic species. How dare humans impose their values on the rest of the galaxy? What gave them the right to dictate terms to civilizations that were older than human history? President Han waited for the noise to die down, then answered the question that everyone was thinking but only a few had dared to ask. You want to know what gives us the right? She said quietly. The same thing that gave the Tolvac Empire the right to murder our children. Power. The difference is what we choose to do with that power. She gestured to Admiral Park, who activated one final hologram. This one showed human technology being shared freely with species that had no armies, no weapons, no ability to defend themselves, medical advances that could cure diseases, agricultural techniques that could end hunger, energy systems that could power entire civilizations without harming their environments. We offer partnership to those who seek peace, President Han said. We offer protection to those who cannot protect themselves, and we offer justice to those who believe that might makes right. Ambassador Lee Dae-ho watched the faces of the delegates as they absorbed this information. The galaxy was being offered a choice: cooperation or resistance, partnership or isolation, peace or the discovery of just how far human patience could be pushed. Most species would choose cooperation. The benefits were obvious, and the alternative was clearly unthinkable. But there would always be some who chose to test humanity's resolve. They would learn the same lesson that the Tolvac Empire had learned. The vote on the new Galactic Accords will take place in 1 week, President Han announced. Until then, we encourage all species to consider carefully what kind of galaxy they want to live in. As the session ended and delegates filed out in nervous clusters, Councillor Velthanis approached the human delegation. The ancient ethereal's form was brighter than usual, indicating strong emotion. It has been 50,000 years since I last spoke to a human leader, Velthanis said. I remember the day your ancestors left. They promised they would return when the galaxy was ready for them. I did not think I would live to see that day. President Han looked up at the being that had witnessed the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations. Are we ready? She asked. Velthanis considered the question. For a long moment, some of you are. Others will learn to be. And those who refuse? The ancient being's form flickered. Well, they will discover why Rule 0 was written in the first place. Captain Kim Tae-jun stood on the observation deck of the new colony, Ship Hope's return, watching Harmony's rest grow larger in the view screen. 3 months after the massacre, humans were returning to rebuild. The crater where the original settlement had been was now a memorial garden, with flowers from Earth growing around a simple monument. The inscription on the monument was visible, from orbit, carved in letters large enough to be seen from space. They thought they could silence us. They were wrong. Dr. Choi Hee-jin stood beside him, carrying seeds for the new research station. She had lost her life's work in the Tolvac attack, but she was ready to begin again. The new facility would be larger and better protected, surrounded by defense systems that could stop anything short of a supernova. Captain, she said quietly, do you think it's really over? The war, I mean. Kim thought about that question. Across the galaxy, human technology was being integrated into civilian infrastructure. Human advisors were helping peaceful species develop better governments. Human teachers were sharing knowledge that would advance civilization by centuries. But there were also human soldiers watching from the shadows,